Everyone, Don Cruikshank here from DC Leadership Training and Consulting, and today is video number 4 in our 5-part video series called Predictable People Problems, or PPP, Predictable People Problems. And in this video series, what we've been exploring is areas that you can expect to encounter conflict or people problems, and they are predictable. So the third area of the predictable people problems is in how you manage change, okay? Everybody manages change a little bit differently, and typically there's 2 ways that people would manage change, and it would either be that you manage change in a dynamic way or you manage change in a predictable way. Now look, I don't know exactly when you're watching this video, but if you're watching it during COVID-19 pandemic, wherever you are globally, things in your life have changed. Maybe you're watching it years after that. That's the beauty of the internet, is that we can put out content and people can watch it forever. So I don't know when you're watching this, but if you're watching this in a time of a real hard change, know that there's people in your life that are more dynamic when it comes to managing change, and people in your life that are more predictable when it comes to managing change. And we're going to dig in deep in the next few minutes here with regards to managing change and why you guys are facing problems when it comes to managing change. Now look, if you've ever done anything on change management, I'm sure you've heard of the bell curve for change, right? And you have your innovators, your early adopters, your early majority, your late majority. You know, at the end of it, you got your 10% or whatever of people that I like to call saboteurs. They're just not going to join with your change regardless of what you do. You've probably all seen the bell curve for change, and if you haven't, you should certainly go and check that out online. You can just Google curve bell change. What you may or may have not heard of is the S-curve or the sigmoid curve, and this is what happens in the life cycle of organizations, is that it's an S-curve like this, and I hope the camera's not picking that up backwards, okay, so just in case it's like that. But it's an S-curve, and in an organization, every organization goes through an S-curve, and if they don't make change at strategic points, they will actually start to come back down on the curve, and the only way to then stop the downward trend there is to make a strategic change at that point and continue the curve up. However, if they would have made the strategic change earlier, then you could have done a half S-curve and made a change and then started to do another half S-curve, and your organization could just go on an upwards trajectory towards greatness. And here's the points along the S-curve. Maybe many of you don't know about this, but you could use the STARS model or the STARS acronym. So you have a startup. Now this can be actually a real startup or an organization that has or a business that has experienced so much turmoil that they are back at the spot as if they were a startup. Okay, S, startup. T, transition, maybe they're in transition of some sort. A, for accelerated growth. You know, that's where you really want to be, and that's where you want to stay. You want to stay in the accelerated growth area. But when you're in accelerated growth, you have to make some changes to continue accelerated growth again. Otherwise, you're going to hit a point, R, where you need realignment. And realignment, things have started to go on a little bit wrong in the organization or business, and we need to realign some things. And then the other S, the last S, is sustaining success. Sustaining success. And you know, you'd be like, well, why don't I want to be in the sustaining success as opposed to the accelerated growth? Look, in the sustaining success area, you're just kind of holding on to what you already have, and you can't stay there forever. Otherwise, you're going to start going down. You'll be a startup again, or you have to make the same changes that a startup makes. You want to be in that accelerated growth stage as often as possible as a business or as an organization, probably even as an individual. Accelerated growth, accelerated growth, accelerated growth. Like I said earlier on, to be able to stay in that area, you're going to need to make some strategic changes. Now, we could tell you what some of those strategic changes are if you got us to come into your business and organization and do a consult for you, and then we could help you with those changes. But for the purpose of this video, I don't know what all the changes are that you and your business or organization need to make. So I'm not going to necessarily talk about what the changes are you have to make, because it could be different. I want to talk about the conflict or the predictable people problems that you're going to face when you try to make some change. Okay, so like I said, you got 2 types of people, two types of people of how they manage change. You got the dynamic person, and they'll generally run with change. Okay, they're ready to go. They might be the innovators, early adopters, they're just ready to go. They're ready to go with change. And you have more of the predictable people. Now, here's what we often think about the predictable people. We often think, well, that predictable person doesn't want to change. They don't want to change. They're stuck in a rut. They'll never change. How many times have you said that about someone or heard that about someone? maybe someone said it about yourself. Maybe it's been true at times, you don't want to change. Here's what is holding back the person who manages change in a predictable fashion. They're not necessarily hesitant or against change. Here's what they need to know. How does this change affect my plans? That's the question they need answered in their mind before they can really come on board. How does this change affect my plans? They need to know that. Okay, they have plans, they've thought it out, they've planned out their life, they've planned out their job, whatever, they've planned it out, and they want to know, how does this change affect my plans? Okay, that is the predictable person. We might think that they're more logical, they're more prepared, they're more structured. We might think the dynamic person is a little bit more progressive or excited. They're just ready to make those changes because they don't have to answer that question in their mind. In their mind, they're ready for change. They're ready to try something new. They're generally ready to try something new. They'll be the ones that will go, hey, let's try something new. If you ever hear someone say, hey, let's try something new, they are probably the person that manages change in a dynamic fashion. If you hear somebody say, well, let's just do it this way because we know it works, they're probably somebody that manages change in a predictable fashion. And you can see how those two people will butt heads, right? One's ready for change. The other isn't quite ready for change. You need to know how it impacts them. But now in your business or organization, you've come to a place where you need to change. Maybe you're at the startup phase. If you're doing a startup, whatever you've done, it's a new business, entrepreneur, church plant, whatever it is, startups are facing change all the time. Everything's changing. You're changing. You're pivoting. You're throwing something out there and trying it. That didn't work. You're changing. You're changing your social marketing campaign. You're changing how you brand. You're changing how you advertise. You're changing everything, okay? So there's a lot of change there. And if you have, and it's not wrong to have that, but if you have part of your ownership group or those that are leading that startup that are predictable in the way that they manage change, they're going to keep you from some pitfalls, but they might slow you down a little bit more than you need to be slowed down because you need to go fast. So you need to be presenting them. Listen, I've said this before in the videos. What you want to do is you always want to encounter the objection before it's said, because it's the unspoken objection that wrecks the deal. So if they're a person that manages change in a predictable fashion and you're doing a startup and you're going to have a lot of changes, you want to go to that person and say, hey, look, we're going to do this change. I realize it's going to impact your plans and it's going to impact them this way. You've already handled the objection, okay? Maybe you're in a realignment phase. In a realignment phase, you're not necessarily doing a whole bunch of changes. You're doing maybe one or two real big changes. Okay, one or two real big changes that it's going to take some time, but they have to happen. Something is not in alignment anymore, and we need to make that change. And again, the person who manages change in a predictable fashion, they may even now have come to the point where they agree, yes, look, our organization needs some serious realignment here. We're not operating as well as we should be. We're not as efficient as we should. We're not hitting our goals. We're not hitting our targets. We're not achieving the hopes and dreams that we had for our business or our organization. We need to do a realignment, but they're still going to need to know, how does the realignment impact them? And so if you're the person that manages change in a predictable fashion, okay, what you can do to help your team is say, look, guys, girls, I am not resistant to change. I know we need to make changes. What will help me is if I understand how these changes impact my plans. Okay, so if you know you're the predictable person who manages change, do that for your team. If you know you're the dynamic person on your team that manages change and you know who the predictable person is, you can say to them, look, I know you like to manage change in a more predictable fashion, but we've all agreed. We all agree. Here's the changes we need to make. Okay, because we're in the realignment phase. What I want to let you know is here's how it's actually going to impact you. Now, also, if you're the dynamic person who manages change, look, this is what drives the predictable people nuts, is that the dynamic person who manages change, if there is a failure, because in change there can be failure, we can do it wrong, right? I've done enough changes with things and organizations. Sometimes we get it wrong. Okay, we get it wrong. We talked about it. We did all the research, and yet somehow we got it wrong. A little bit wrong. Whatever, we got it wrong. So you can get it wrong. The dynamic person who manages change will look at that time of getting it wrong and they'll just ignore it. Like, oh well, got that one wrong. No big deal. I'll get the next one right. And so if you're a dynamic person managing change and you're on a team with somebody who's more predictable, you need to realize that when you do that, the person who's more predictable is actually going to see you as irresponsible. And you're not trying to be irresponsible, you're just continuing to move forward. You're a let's go forward kind of person. But you need to realize that that person is going to see you as irresponsible. So what you need to do is you need to stop, even just for a brief moment, and take ownership of that. Take ownership of the failure. You're right. That failed. That was my idea, and I take 1,000% ownership of that. And then you can move forward, right? But take ownership of it. Own your stuff. Dynamic people who manage change, own your stuff, because the predictable person, when you say that, think, great, let's move forward. When you don't say that, the next time you come forward with change, the person who manages change in a predictable fashion is going to go, wait a minute, last time this person did something, it failed, and they didn't own it. So you need to own your failures as a dynamic person who manages change, and as a predictable person who manages change, you need to come and help your team by saying, look, I know we need to make a change. I know it's going to impact me, and what will help me agree with this change and make this change is if you let me know how that is going to impact my plans. Look, we go on far more with managing change in organizations and businesses in your life. Again, this is true in everywhere. This is true in your business, your organization, your family life, those who you play with, those who you worship with, those who you hang out with. There's change that happens in all of those areas, and you're going to have people who are more predictable, and you're going to have people who are more dynamic, and you can expect that there's going to be problems between them. But hopefully, if you apply what we've said today, you will be able to navigate that change in a time where it is more successful for both of you in the organization, the business, your friendship, whatever it is. And I want to tell you this. Neither person is wrong. Neither person is wrong. These are both strengths on your team, your business, your family, those you play with. Neither person is wrong. The person who is predictable in the way that they manage change, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. How could you fault them for wanting to know how it impacts them? They're not wrong. They want to know, how does this impact me? The person who's more dynamic when it comes to managing change, they're not wrong. They maybe don't necessarily care how it impacts them, but they're not wrong. How could you fault someone for wanting to make a necessary change and saying, let's do it? Let's make that necessary change. And so you actually need both of those people on your teams and in your organizations. And if you want to learn more about how you can invest in your team, your leadership team, or your organization, head over to our website. The link will be in the comment section below for DC Leadership Training and Consulting. We do half-day, full-day, multi-day, lunch and learn, all kinds of workshops or activities for your group to lean into their strengths and to become a higher performance team. That is one of our services, but we'll cater that out and throw it out to you and plan it out and build it out in any way that you guys need. Again, as always, if you've enjoyed and appreciated what you've watched on the video, please do give it a big thumbs up wherever you're watching it, either YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever social media platform you're on. Please do subscribe to our channel. Super important. We need to get those subscriptions up to help us keep making this content and let others know, hey, you guys need to check out DC Leadership Training on your journey towards greatness, because they believe in you and they can help you achieve the dreams that you have in your heart and mind. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. I hope the rest of it is more successful than it was so far. Bye for now. Thanks again.